We begin in God's name. Greetings. Welcome to From Gandhi's Desk. Our discussion continues on the 23 question series, and today we are to begin the 144th episode. The topic under discussion is, what is Hadith? Let us continue. Hadith, in your view, is the Prophet's knowledge, deeds, and the history of his times? What was the history of this history? And how did this historical corpus get transformed into a critical discipline? And what process did they formulate for the verification of this historical corpus? What were the standards for acceptance of narrations? After the chain of narrations, I wish you to take the discussion ahead and tell us the content of those narrations, the chains that were existing in those historical corpus and narrations. After passing them through the process of verification, what critical standards did they set regarding the text of narrations?
The topics which we are conversing about, the first thing among them under discussion is what are the standards for the acceptance and rejection of Hadith? The debate on the chain of narration has finished. Now we would look at the text of Hadith. There are just two things. First are the people who relate a certain narration, which is called chain of narration. As for the standards which were set for it by the experts of Hadith, I have stated my point of view on them. This part of the discussion is being read out from the first section of my book, Meezan.
Right.
The other thing is the text I have written. After investigating the chain of narration, the second thing is the text of a Hadith. That is what actually was said. The text means that so-and-so has stated, and so-and-so has stated. But what has been said?
That is, its content.
Obviously, that point is being reported in attribution to the Prophet. Peace be upon him. The real importance is of that point. The chain of Hadith was verified for that very point. After investigating the chain of narration, second comes the text of Hadith. Although the scholars and experts of Hadith have left no stone unturned when it comes to investigating the character and biographies of the narrators in order to reach accurate information, that is, they have done their utmost possible at the human level. They collected whatever information could be gathered, whatever could be known about the narrator's life and character. What is the level of memory and retention, and the way it can be ascertained? What information can be accumulated with regard to historical contemporaneousness? For all these things, to gather information about them, and to carry out research and investigation for them, they tried their level best to ascertain them. They left no stones unturned on their part, and dedicated their lives for this work. Here, this point has been stated in 2 sentences, and its history has been brought under discussion by us in detail as well. Yet, like with every human effort, the natural flaws which still exist in this endeavor. Notice the natural flaws which still remain, despite all the efforts which have been made to remedy it. That is, each and every possible aspect has been investigated. When a human being researches something, the means available to him are, of course, limited. That is, even if I work for years together to form an opinion about the life and character of a person, the possibility of a mistake still exists. It is possible that something remains undiscovered. It is possible that I may not reach to some conclusion. Same is the situation in ascertaining memory and retention. With regard to conclusions from history, we may say that, to a large extent, we are able to reach the right conclusions, however. The possibility of obtaining wrong information cannot be ruled out there as well. We are aware that, in our own society, even till 50 or 100 years back, people did not even keep the record of the dates of birth.
Right.
Mostly guesswork was done in that regard. When you get some information based on such guesswork, only later on it was realized that an error of up to 10 or 20 years was being made. And this really happens. I will tell you my own experience of an interesting anecdote about my mother. Her age then must have been about 70 or 72 years. I had taken her to a physician for a checkup, as she wasn't feeling well. The physician asked her, "Dear lady, what would be your age? You are aware that physicians generally note down the age." She said, "Somewhere around 40 years.
Strange. Okay.
She is an elderly lady, and she had a kind of rural background. She came up with this number quite nonchalantly. She must have thought this." So, the physician laughed and said, "Then I am quite older than you." Such things can be expected in the rural environment of our society. Here as well you may obtain wrong information on occasion. Likewise, the possibilities for this will always remain, that people were very truthful. They purposely did not intend a mistake from their side, however. They may have erred in case of understanding something. We saw that the debate occurred even among the companions, that a personality like the Caliph Umar himself narrates something attributing it to the Prophet, peace be upon him. And the mother of the faithful, Aisha, comments on it that Umar has not narrated a lie, or he hasn't attributed wrongly a point towards the Prophet, peace be upon him, yet, at times, there can be a mistake in hearing. If there is a mistake in hearing or in understanding, a person entered a gathering at the moment when he isn't aware of the context and backdrop. Now imagine that the Prophet, peace be upon him, is engaged in a sermon, and during the conversation, the Prophet states that the people of the book had various superstitions. They have changed various things into stories and tales. Say he began talking about this, and then recounted a few such tales, in order to illustrate the kinds of errors they did. Say a person enters the gathering when the Prophet was recounting that tale. He in turn states it in the manner as if the Prophet, peace be upon him, was not just relating the tale, but was approving of it as well. There are various things of this kind, which in spite of all these precautions, would have to be taken into consideration. That is, we have to acknowledge it to be a human effort. There was no negligence done from their sides, however. The possibility cannot be ruled out that the point which is being attributed to the Prophet, peace be upon him, that attribution might not be correct. For this reason, the precaution is taken while reading out a narration to say at the end of it, أو كما قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. That is, this point may be as it has reached us, or as per the narrator, or as the Prophet, peace be upon him, would have stated it, as one can't say with certainty. This is the reason that the knowledge that is gained from it, our entire academic tradition, accepts the point that this knowledge is conjectural, not certain. That is a preponderant possibility. We have reached this conclusion after research. This point should always be in consideration for all human endeavors. This point is described here in the introduction. After investigating the chain of narration, the next is the text of Hadith. Although scholars of Hadith have left no stone unturned in investigating the characters and biographies of the narrators, the experts of Hadith have left no stones unturned, and have spent a greater part of their lives in this research. That is, there isn't any mistake in this. Yet, like every human endeavor, the natural flaws which still exist in the narration of a Hadith require that in consideration of them, in consideration of the natural flaws that still exist, I haven't dealt in detail right here. The people who wish to understand the details further, they should refer to the work Principles of Understanding, Hadith of Ustad Imam, Amin, Ahsan Islahi.
Right.
There is a full section in it where he has stated the complete details of it. In consideration of those, that is, the flaw that still exists, or flaws which have remained, in consideration of those, the following two things, while investigating the text of a Hadith, should necessarily be seen. After the consideration of chain of narration, now the text should be looked at. What are those two themes? One is that nothing in it should be against the Quran and Sunnah.
Against the Quran and Sunnah.
Nothing in it should be against the Quran and Sunnah. We have said earlier, like the Quran is fixed, like it is the book of God, it is available with us. Exactly in the same way, Sunnah too is fixed. It has been transmitted through consensus and adherence. We can compile a list of them, and we can present it before the Muslims. We have dealt with all these topics earlier in the sessions on what is Sunnah.
Right.
1. Something in it, that is, in the text of the Hadith now, the text which is under discussion, the topic which has been stated should not contain anything against the Quran and Sunnah.
A question, Ghamidi Sahab. While discussing Sunnah, you had explained that the difference between the Sunnah, according to you and according to the scholars, appears when they consider the narrations to be a part of the corpus of Sunnah. So, if you are reading to us the point of the Muhaddithin, then according to them, the source of Sunnah are the historical narrations themselves. How can they say that it shouldn't be against the Sunnah?
It will become clear soon. We would get to this presently. I have just summarized. So I was saying, firstly, nothing should be against the Quran and Sunnah. Secondly, Nothing should be against universals of knowledge and common sense.
Right.
So two things universally accepted facts and reason. It wasn't said that a person simply states that such a thing is beyond my comprehension. The established premises of knowledge and reason are different, and my knowledge can be limited. My intelligence can fall into a mistake, however. The things which have the status of universal principles of knowledge and intellect are ascertained at the global level. Everyone accepts them. Nobody can deny them. And same is the case of the principles of common sense. This was the second point within these desiderata. I have elaborated it further. So the first point was, nothing in it should be against the Quran and Sunnah. Now, going further. About the Quran, it has already been explained that in religion, the Quran is the Meezan and the Furqan. For this, people should not only refer to this book, they should also listen to the discussions that we have done on the topic of differences over Qira'at.
And Meezan and Furqan.
And we had discussed it separately under Meezan and Furqan. It has already been explained that in the religion, the Quran has the status of Meezan and the Furqan. That is, it has the decisive status. After referring to it, will be decided the thing which would be considered as the religion, and the thing which won't be considered as the religion. That has been revealed with the objective of لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ فِي مَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ. It decides over all the differences. In the religion, the Quran is the Meezan and Furqan. It acts as a guardian of every religious concept, and it has been revealed as a judge to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong. All these points have been discussed in detail. Therefore, no further explanation is required of the fact that if anything goes against the principles of the Quran, then it must necessarily be rejected. That is, if a chain of narration shines brighter than the sun, and the people narrating it count among the experts of Hadith. But if it goes against the Quran, and we are clear about the point that the Quran does not accept it, it will consequently be rejected. And the point would be acknowledged that even the greatest of scholars can commit a mistake in research. Human knowledge cannot be completely free from mistakes. Whatever be our efforts and dedication, what is the ultimate result of it? The preponderant or probable likelihood, that is, it's as if we carry out the research and draw this inference that from whatever resources that were available to us, the maximum that can be inferred from it is this thing that I am stating. Hence, if it is against the Quran, it has to necessarily be rejected. Similar is the case with the Sunnah. Whatever guidance of religion has been received through these means, that is through the Sunnah, regarding that too, this point has been elaborated quite categorically earlier. That the Prophet, peace be upon him, had promulgated it complete full care, as with the Quran.
Okay.
There is no difference between the level of authenticity of the two. Just as the Quran is transmitted through the consensus and oral adherence of the Ummah, similarly, the Sunnah has also been transmitted from its consensus and practical adherence. There is no difference between the level of authenticity of the two. Just as the Quran is validated through the consensus of the Muslim community, the Sunnah is also determined from its consensus. Since these truths are absolutely categorical with respect to the Sunnah, thus, if they're an isolated report, that is Hadith.
Right.
If an isolated report goes against the Sunnah, and if there is no way out to resolve a conflict between the two, if there's a conflict between the two, and there is no way out for reconciling of the conflict, both the words or both the statements seek attention.
Yes.
Apparently it seems that something is against the Quran. No, there should be a stark contradiction. And then you must make full effort so that a mutual harmony is sought between the two. An understanding is achieved as to their relation. What is this process called? To develop a possibility of convergence. At times it happens that apparently something seems to be contradicting. Nevertheless, another perspective exists, which when adopted removes the contradiction and reconciliation develops. So, if contradictions exist and there is no way for reconciliation, then that will be discarded consequently. That is the same would be the case with Sunnah. So, what was the second point Nothing in it should be against universal principles.
Right.
Established universal truths of knowledge and reason also have the same status in this regard. That is, the status which the Quran and Sunnah enjoys, the same is that of these universal truths. The Quran is absolutely clear that its message is based on these established facts. That is, the Quran itself presents its dawah on the basis of the facts derived from knowledge and common sense. Those things have become part of our knowledge. Those have been proven in history. Reason is compelled to accept them. When all these things are fundamental and the dawah of the Quran itself is based upon them, how then can something be acceptable which is against them? Two things have primary status in our religion: oneness of God and the belief in the hereafter. Tawheed implies oneness of God. He is the sole creator. Only He is to be worshipped. And Maud implies Judgment Day. Even its arguments on such basic issues as oneness of God and hereafter are primarily based on these facts. If you note, it argues about the oneness of God. It argues about the certainty of Judgment Day. It reasons about reward and punishment. What is the basis of these arguments on these established principles of knowledge and common sense? It is the requirements and demands of these facts which the Quran highlights through its teachings. That is, it takes up the established principles of knowledge and common sense and would present this as their obvious consequence. This is the outcome. How can you deny the conclusion that after having accepted the premises, the style of the Quran in such instances is of كَيْفَ تَحْكُمُونَ? How can you declare such a ruling or decision? So it gives this status to the established principles of knowledge and common sense. Every student of the Quran is aware of the point that it presents these facts as deciding factors for the truth of the message it puts forth. That is, in the way, the Quran, for us, is a decisive judge for everything related to the religion. God has revealed His book with the status of the decisive authority. Likewise, when the Quran presents forth its dawah, it draws humanity's attention to refer to the established principles of knowledge and common sense. It should look towards it. These are the blessings given to him by his Lord. These were the first revelations. These should be realized first before reviewing the Quran. They will never be able to deny it. Every student of the Quran is aware that it makes them, that is, the established principles of knowledge and common sense, as arbiters for the message it puts forth. It presented them as the final word, both before the idolaters of Arabia and before the Jews and the Christians too. What is the yardstick? It would be these. When these things are scientifically known, and no one can deny it, how then can the consequence of it be denied? For example, this universe, you have accepted that it is the work of a creator. As there is a creator, therefore, the creator tells us that one day he would wrap it all up and then would recreate it under a new set of rules and laws. Thus, the Quran argues that you accept its creation in the first instant. If you accept the first instant of its creation, it implies that its first creation has assumed the status of established principles of knowledge and common sense. The addressees have accepted it. They have recognized it as knowledge, and their intellect has any objection to it either. Therefore, it states that a refurbishment is quite simple. Hence, what did Quran do? That is, the point that had been accepted in accordance with knowledge and reason, its necessary consequence was made the basis of argument.
Right.
This is just one example. There are multiple instances of such examples in the Quran. It presented them as the final word both before the idolaters of Arabia and the Jews and Christians too. For example, about the people of the book, if something has been stated in the Torah, then it is among the established principles of knowledge. The Quran would take that as a basis to prove its case. Those who oppose them, that is, those things which have been accepted as knowledge and common sense, those who oppose them are regarded by it as people who follow their base desires. Those people who deny things which are evidently true, the things which are testified by our senses, those which are affirmed by the inner senses of human beings, those which are stamped with the confirmation by the physical senses of human beings. If someone falsifies and contradicts them, the Quran declares that such people are following their base desires. They've denied themselves of knowledge and intellect, therefore. They say all this. Those who oppose this are regarded by it as people who follow base desires. Thus, intuitive realities, the historical truths, the inferences and results of experience and observation all are discussed in the Quran in this very capacity. That is what will it do? The things which are being clearly observed and felt by a human being, that is, his inner senses acknowledge the presence of these things. We have given dozens of examples of it. I have hate, love, or resentment inside me. I bear some sentiments. All these are being experienced by my inner sense, are feeling them. These are realities for me. These can't be denied or questioned. If you reflect over it, the same is the case with historical truths. That is, there are things which transmit as isolated information in history as well. Regarding them, arguments can be made whether those are right or wrong. However, those historical truths which have been transmitted through consensus and adherence, for example, the fact that there used to be a Mughal empire in the subcontinent, this is a truth of history. The specifics of what Shah Jahan or Bahadur Shah Zafar or another Mughal monarch said or did can be debated. However, this is an established fact. Pakistan as a country has come into existence. It was founded in 1947, and the name of its founder is Muhammad Ali Jinnah. These are the truths of history. Thus, intuitive realities, historical truths, results of experience and observation, that is, the things which come in the grasp of our physical senses. We can see them. Those have come in our experience. All are discussed in the Quran in this very capacity. Here I have elaborated upon it. What are the established principles of knowledge and reason? It is these. These are the very things which the Quran takes as a basis to present its own dawah, and expects human beings to decide on their basis. When he displays such an attitude against them, it criticizes him, and draws his attention to this contradiction, that how can he deny these things? These are the foundations of your knowledge. Thus, those things which the Quran itself points to, what are those things? The things which I have stated thus, those things which the Quran has declared as a standard to distinguish between right and wrong. It will give reference to these things. Look at the earth, the sky. This is your experience. This point has come to your knowledge. This is a historical truth. It presents all these things. Hence, those things which the Quran itself has made the benchmark for right and wrong. An isolated report which is against these facts can be regarded as acceptable. Isolated news implies the information which has been reported by a single or two or four individuals, about which it cannot be said that at what point the narrator might have erred, or where they unknowingly made a mistake in understanding the backdrop of a particular point, and stated it in such a way in which the speaker had not intended to speak. How can an isolated news against them be regarded as acceptable? It is very clear that we shall reject it come what may. Thus, I have summarized this entire topic regarding the text of Hadith in 2 points. One, that we would check the text for anything which goes against the Quran or Sunnah. Obviously, our understanding would be decisive. When the experts of Hadith declare satisfaction over the seerah of a person, it is their understanding and their research. Similarly, when they consider something that it is against the Quran, then they would first ascertain their understanding from the Quran.
Right.
Again, there can be errors. However, it is expected from human beings to research things in this manner. We would reject it straight away. If it is against the Quran and Sunnah, we will reject it. These are the principles of the acceptance and rejection of Hadith. If it is against the established universal truths, we would reject it. All leading scholars of Hadith also hold this view.
Okay.
That is, I do not have any disagreement with scholars of Hadith here as well. The way they have set the benchmark for the verification of the chain of narration and the manner in which they have pointed out aspects of defects, I completely agree with it. I do not have even a single point which can be added to it or which can be taken away from it. Same is the case here too. That is, what do they say with regard to textual criticism? What is their point of view? They have stated all these things in their books. What I have done is nothing other than the following. I have merely summarized them in 2 simple points. All leading scholars of Hadith also hold this view. Al-Kifayatu fi ilm al-riwayah is the source book of their science. That is, It is said that Al-Kifayatu fi ilm riwayah, written by Khatib Baghdadi, it is such a book that it holds the status of the mother book for this science. It is a primary text. It holds the status of fundamental source. This is the book about which the experts of Hadith of later periods say, Kullun ayadun ilay. Everyone from later periods has relied on this very book. It is the pioneer of this science. Its author, Khatib Baghdadi, writes, وَلَا يُقْبَلُ الْخَبَرُ الْوَاحِدُ فِي مُنَافَاةِ حُكْمِ الْعَقْلِ وَحُكْمِ الْقُرْآنِ الثَّابِتِ الْمُحْكَمِ وَالسُّنَّةِ الْمَعْلُومَةِ وَالْفِعْلِ الْجَارِ مَجْرَى السُّنَّةِ وَكُلِّ دَلِيلٍ مَكْتُوبٍ بِهِ. I have read this from page 432. Its translation is an isolated report, that is, a hadith. An isolated report cannot be accepted whenever reason dictates against it. I have called these universal truths. Any isolated report cannot be accepted in case it is contradicted by any universal truth of reason, or when it is against an established and explicit directive of the Quran, when it is against a known sunnah, or is against a practice which is established just like the sunnah, or its conflict with some conclusive proof becomes absolutely evident. This is the standard which the experts of Hadith have themselves stated for the text. I said that I have summarized this very thing. I have not made any addition or deletion in it. Here the Hadith experts themselves are stating the point that an established sunnah is something while isolated report is something else.
Okay.
That is, the Prophet, peace be upon him, promulgated a particular directive as part of the religion. In the words of Imam Shafi, it has turned into ilmul amma. Every Muslim is aware of it. All companions are aware of it. Their successors are aware of it. We have dwelt in detail on it. There has been long discussion about it. We have elaborated them in what sunnah is, from various angles. This is sunnat maluma. The word maluma implies that everybody knows of it. It is ilmul amma. When something is narrated against any such thing, say, an individual does it, or two do it, or four state it, whatever be the state of its chain of narration, it will not be accepted. And when the experts of Hadith say that it will not be accepted, then what does it mean? It means that the Quran and the Sunnah have the final authority. The Quran and Sunnah for us is the religion given by the Messenger of God. The way the Quran and Sunnah were transmitted, they have reached us intact. There cannot be any debate as far as their authenticity is concerned. Now, we tried to understand them and learn something from them. Now we may place this understanding against the understanding of the narration. It is we who are trying to understand them as well. And if we reach the conclusion that the Quran does not accept such a narration, the Sunnah does not accept such a narration, the universal truths do not accept such a narration, then we would suspend our judgment regarding it. And if the nature of contradiction is such that there is no further scope of a debate, then we would reject it outrightly.
Ghamidi Sahab, the standards for the acceptance and rejection were discussed in great detail. You referred to the books, or rather classical books of our traditional scholars and experts of Hadith to put forth your views. There are two things. Ghamidi Sahab, he has used here a word sunnat maluma. You have yourself explained what is sunnah. Sunnah for them is classified into two types. So which sunnah is he talking about in this case that it shouldn't be against it?
He has clarified that point further onwards. That is, the sunnah which is known to every person. That sunnah which is proven, about which there is no debate. Whether the Prophet, peace be upon him, had issued it for the purpose of being practiced or not, about which no one has any doubt. Just see he has further stated in these words that sunnat maluma, or against any such deed which is established as sunnah. So, the word established as sunnah makes it clear the kind of sunnah he is referring to.
Okay.
The sunnah, which he thinks a sunnah qua isolated report, that he separates out, and the sunnah which falls in the category of established sunnah or widely disseminated sunnah, which he refers to here with the term sunnat maluma. We express the same meaning by just the word sunnah.
Ghamidi Sahab, that sunnah, which is being adhered to with perpetuality, that is being made the standard, and the isolated report is seen in their light. So if there is a contradiction between them, then the other Sunnah would prevail.
This is the point. And in this case, it isn't just this much. You will see that he would take up this contradiction to the point that a narration among us, if it has come from a more knowledgeable companion, or a more trustworthy one, in comparison, if some individual is only Sikha, however, his scholarly level is not that. He states such a thing where contradiction has developed, then it would be rejected, and this is termed as shazuz, everywhere. The point of consideration is how a particular thing has been transmitted. The Quran has reached us through consensus and practical adherence. Sunnah, just the term Sunnah, is sufficient for us. For him, it's proven Sunnah, established Sunnah, or widely disseminated. It has reached in this very manner, therefore it is termed Sunnatun Thabita. This is why it's termed Sunnatun Mutawatira, and this is why it is called Maluma. Imam Shafi had adopted this term that it's turned into Ayyimul Amma,
Yes.
and against it he has placed isolated report and formed the principle that it won't be accepted against it.
Ghamidi Saab, what are the standards for acceptance or rejection of the text of Hadith? 3 such standards were discussed. The verification of the chain, the character and memory of the narrators and their contemporaneousness, and the 2 standards that came forth for the acceptance of the text of the narration, the first being that it should not be against the Quran and Sunnah, and the second that it should not be against universal truths. We have used up the time allocated. We shall be back again. Thank you for your time till now.